Thanks a lot for that, Jesse. It's great to be here online with you all. Look, I'll follow the slideshow to a great extent, but just to make a few opening remarks, we're an Australian listed company. We're also on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange as well, and we're in the nickel development business, and also we're exploring for large gold copper systems in Australia as well, and we're doing some quite exciting things there in terms of exploring and monetizing that, which I'll talk about in a moment. But let's start going through slide number 2. Just the usual disclaimer. Slide number 3. So essentially where we're at with the value proposition is we are looking to become globally significant in the nickel space, and there's some very good reasons why we can do that. But also we have gold copper exploration, which we're looking to derive substantial value from in our own right, but also through monetizing it through joint ventures and corporate activity. We've done some of that recently. I'll talk more about that later. Next slide. So essentially our capital structure, we've got approximately 600 million shares on issue. We're currently trading at about 0.8 of a cent on the Australian Stock Exchange. We have come down, obviously, with the recent drop in the nickel and the iron ore price. Happily, both of those have rebounded quite healthily, and with recent activity with QE3, and some stronger, firmer numbers coming out of markets around the world, it looks like we're on a good trajectory. But essentially, we are at about 0.8 of a cent at the moment, and that is an all-time low. High is 85 cents 5 years ago. Next slide. What is it? Now, essentially, we've got a 5-person board. Here, our chairman is Ian Campbell, the former Federal Environment Minister. He's been of great assistance to us. Greg Mellick, a very prominent Tasmanian former head of the Defence Reserves in Australia. Kay Phillip, a geophysicist. Leah Darby, a corporate executive. And myself as Managing Director. We also have Pierre Richard, who's our CFO, who's based in London. He helps us with our Northern Hemisphere projects. And between the whole team, we've managed to cover a lot of bases. Next slide. Now, into the fun stuff. Essentially, nickel is a great base metal to be in. It's very high value. It's got a lot of great uses, about 3,500 alloys for 250,000 uses. It's an LME metal, like copper. However, it still has a large opportunity in the nickel market that we're looking to fulfill, and that is most of the world's nickel, about 2/3, is in a mineral type that is essentially very difficult to process. I'll say more about that in a moment. Next slide, Bernard. So the supply problem. Essentially what you've got with Barrier Bay and the supply problem is the ability for us as Proto, owning half of the Barrier Bay technology company, to overcome the principal issue with nickel laterite, which is 2/3 of the world's nickel reserves. Next slide. Supply problem. Yeah. So essentially, 1/3 of the world's nickel is based in sulfide deposits, conventional sulfide deposits that sometimes have copper with them and a few other things. We're obviously looking for those in Australia in our exploration. But 2/3 of the world's nickel is in laterite ore bodies. Now, groups use multi-billion capex, high-pressure acid leach facilities to process this nickel laterite. And that they do that for a number of technical reasons, but unfortunately that history has been very tortured. People have lost a lot of money, and they found that maintaining such high capexes has been very difficult with an oscillating nickel price, energy and sulfuric acid price, so on and so forth. And what we've looked to do with Barrier Bay, and I'll start flicking through these slides now, is to overcome that by essentially using our own technology to recycle our main input cost, which is sulfuric acid. That's about 60% of our OPEX, so a very large OPEX portion there, over half. We use our technology to recycle the sulfuric acid, and by doing that we can actually produce more saleable product as well, iron and magnesium, and that is obviously of great benefit, because what used to be a very expensive waste stream now becomes a profit center, and you're recycling the product that makes up 60% of your input cost. Let me just flip the next slide. Okay, now essentially one of our partners is Dow Chemicals. I had the pleasure of having lunch this week with Andrew Liveris, the Managing Director of Dow Chemicals Global in Canberra, where he was addressing the Australian National Press Gallery and the government on advanced manufacturing. And essentially what Dow have created that we use at the front end is a low pH nickel resin system. So what that means is that after you have your ore leach, where the sulfuric acid in dilute form is run through the ore, you actually end up with a solution that with the Dow technology you can actually remove the nickel and cobalt from straight up. So you don't have to dope it, you don't have to treat it, you don't have to have high pressure vessels, so on and so forth. You can actually remove your main payable products from the acidic solution, and that is something that was not believed to be able to be done in the past. So that's obviously a fantastic step forward for nickel processing from nickel laterite. However, the issue is you're still then left with the iron and the magnesium sulfate problem. And it's not just in nickel laterite that you get these waste streams of iron and magnesium sulfate. Olympic Dam has an iron sulfate residue as well. And that's an IOCGU. A whole range of mines use sulfuric acid as a reagent. Well, our technology that's in the Barrier Bay company can take that iron and magnesium sulfate and convert it into recycled acid, sulfuric acid, H2SO4, and saleable iron and magnesium hydroxide. Now, you won't necessarily make a lot of money out of the iron and magnesium, but the point is it's a slight benefit, and you've eliminated it as a cost. Because without that, I'm afraid you have to take the iron and magnesium sulfate, you have to precipitate it with limestone, which you obviously have to buy in and transport, and then you have to put it in a very large and expensive tailings dam, which is obviously problematic from an environmental point of view. So whereas a lot of people try processing nickel laterite, they're always left with the iron problem. We've managed that. We've managed the sulfuric acid problem, and what that means is that we can produce our nickel and cobalt, but we don't have to use the nickel and cobalt profits to then pay for the treatment of the waste stream. So that is, in a nutshell, how the front end and the back end work. Dow's involved for the front end. The back end is something that we're simply working on ourselves. But with that capability of the front end and the back end, you've got a complete closed loop solution which vastly reduces your OPEX and indeed your CAPEX as well, because there's no need for high pressure vessels or any of that multi-billion dollar CAPEX you see with other projects. Sorry, next slide. So look, I mean, it's quite an exciting technology for nickel, because you are talking about over half, about 2/3 of the world's nickel reserves being based in laterite, and it's still an open question for other companies as to how they treat it. Now, if I was sitting here saying to you, Proto would like to be globally significant in copper, well, you'd correctly point out that there's a very mature market there. The Chilenos produce 40% of the world's copper. And you can derive copper from a number of different ore bodies. However, with nickel, 2/3 of nickel reserves are in nickel laterite, and we have what we believe is by far the most cost-efficient and straightforward technology for processing it. So that whole market in a valuable base metal, about 40 billion market per annum, is still open for us. in terms of exploiting it. I mean, obviously nickel sulfide is a great orthodox mineral type. Nickel sulfide mines such as Norilsk, Western Areas, Flying Fox, the Sudbury nickel sulfide mines, they're all great money spinners, but they do only make up 1/3 of the world's nickel reserves. You do have to find them, and nickel laterite actually occurs on the Earth's surface, so it's more straightforward to mine and obviously that makes it a lot more logistically straightforward, and it occurs in larger quantities. So the game-changing nature of Barrier Bay is essentially allowing us to take this part of the market, this part of the world's nickel reserves, and actually work on monetizing that through our technology and through our own project development, which I'll say a bit more about in a minute. Next line. So we have a project that we're bringing online towards the end of next year. It's the Barnes Hill project in Tasmania. And essentially this was Australia's first metal mine back about 200 years ago. There's iron ore there, there's nickel, there's also some chrome. We're looking to develop the area for nickel, and part of our strategy is, as well as having a majority interest in our technology company, we're looking to actually develop projects and derive earnings from them ourselves in conjunction with our joint venture partner, Metals Finance Corporation, which we own 20% of, Caterpillar Finance, who we've recently re-signed with for debt finance and equipment supply, and Dow Chemicals for some of the front-end plant and equipment that they provide. So it's a very robust strategy where we're looking to not just derive one project earnings, but then move on to multiple projects and then sell the technology as well. So we're looking for multiple earnings entry points from our corporate strategy that we have. And now Barnes Hill is a great project from the point of view, it's about 10 kilometres from a port, deepwater port. It's only a few kilometres from power, people, 200 metres from a sealed road. I personally don't know of a better positioned mine in the world, except for the mine that sits right next to Barnes Hill, which is the Beaconsfield gold mine that's been operating for quite some time. And we picked this mine for Proto because it is so logistically robust in terms of its proximity to logistics. And I think really this is the key. Obviously there's a lot of money to be made in remote areas with valuable resources, but if you're close to port, power, people, and all other logistics, then essentially you've cut down a huge amount of risk out of the project and made it a much more accessible to go through the development phases, which we're doing at the moment. Next slide. Was it doing that? What's up, Drake? So there's a couple of diagrams there for people to look at. It's just a small mining lease that we have there, about 1 square kilometre, just under about 98 hectares. But that's a granted mining lease. And the mineable reserve we have there was independently stated by Snowden's consultants. Next slide. So we're looking at a small footprint environmentally as we can. We're very keen to create as little disturbance as possible. It is open cut, but by the same token we're able to remediate in quite a straightforward fashion. We don't go down too low. There's not any drilling or blasting. Okay, so the development proposal we lodged late last year along with the environmental management plan, so we're quite well advanced. The mining lease was granted middle of last year, and we now have the development proposal and the EMP lodged as well. So we're just going through the final stages of that, and we think we've got about another 3 to 4 months on that before we can get our final operating approval to start building the mine and moving it forward with our JV partner MFC. Now, one of the things that we're trying to do also with our strategy of becoming globally significant in nickel is not just working on the technology solution for nickel laterite. We're also looking to provide a financial solution as well for ourselves and for other companies with nickel laterite ore bodies. Now, we've come to an arrangement with Caterpillar Financial. We actually announced the extension of that yesterday. They will provide the equipment and they will arrange the debt finance for the entirety of the project. So that's a very strong relationship that we have with them out of Zurich, Dan Cox and Matthias Kaufmann, and they've been very helpful and supportive in what we're doing. They're very interested in the technology, and we have an arrangement with them to also give them the first right of refusal on our other nickel projects as well. And we're looking at that as a strong relationship to continue into the future. We're quite happy to use Caterpillar equipment. We think it's very good, and if we can simplify project development by knowing who our financial partners are, then that obviously assists. Now, Dow Chemicals, as I mentioned before, has the front-end technology, the Dow low pH nickel resin product, which, as I said, can grab nickel and cobalt from an acidic solution, about a pH of 1.7, without having to dope it up to a higher pH. So they're very important, and through our joint venture partner, MFC, they can provide plant finance as well for about 10 to 20% of the overall capex in terms of their machinery. So that's obviously quite a strong opportunity that we have as well, and it makes this whole process a lot more straightforward as well. Excellent. So look, essentially, apart from the development in nickel that we have, we are looking also at gold and copper, because obviously we want to stay diversified. We believe we've got a very strong story developing in nickel. However, we don't want to rely on that 100% and turn our backs on gold and copper, which can provide very significant earnings for us. So we have several slides here on our WA, Western Australian and Northern Territory assets. And essentially what we're looking to do is drill in our own right, which we've done, but also do joint ventures and get other companies who we have equity positions in to explore for us, and then we have access to the upside of their projects through having a shareholding in their company, as well as them spending money on our ground. We've got 3 quite valuable joint ventures in WA, which I'll talk about in a moment, and we own approximately, slightly over 10% of that company when all the shares are issued, a company that recently listed, Victory Mines. So it's a very strong, diversified approach that we're taking overall, and also inside the gold copper exploration. There is these joint ventures that we have, as well as exploration in our own right, 100%, and our ownership of shares in other companies as well. But I'll speak specifically now about the projects. Lindeman's Bore in the Northern Territory is a project that we've actually received Northern Territory government funding for. It's a Norilsk-style target that the local geological survey has given us some assistance with. Norilsk is the largest nickel company in the world, and they've got a lot of projects in Siberia, the Siberian traps that have nickel, copper, platinum, palladium, a whole range of elements and vast quantities of them. So if you find one of these things, you're pretty much made for a very long time. And the only other analog in the world is the ground that we have in the Northern Territory, because it also is, for those technologically minded or technically minded, it's the only other continuously crustally contaminated continental flood basalt complex. So that's quite a tongue twister at any time of the day. But obviously, exploration like this can, through success, provide you with multi-element risk mitigation. So you don't just find nickel, you find nickel, copper, and precious metals as well. So we think that's a very good way of keeping inside our core, which is nickel, but also looking for other elements as well in that style of mineralization. Now, we drilled 3 holes into Lindeman's bore, and on our 3rd hole we hit the western side of a gold-copper hydrothermal system. So, and that was the western side of a large EM anomaly, which we'd found using some ZTEM technology, which NASA and a Canadian company worked on, that tracks the ambient fields of electromagnetics created by lightning strikes. So what we're looking to do there is a 4th hole angled directly into the middle of the EM anomaly, and if it is what we think it is, a large gold-copper system, then it could potentially, if it's at the right grade, be an extremely valuable mineral deposit, which of course is what you're always looking for in exploration. But the work that we've done on this project is really starting to define an extremely interesting target, and we only need to do 1 hole actually, angled directly into the center of that EM target to actually discover whether that gold-copper mineralization is continued in the center and at what grade and how much, so on and so forth. So that's the Lindeman's bore project. We have about 50% of that at the moment, 60 going down to 50. But in WA, we're in the Sandfire region, otherwise known as Dulgunna. Is that where we're at? And essentially, this has been a gold-copper province that's been known about for a while, but Sandfire recently, about 3 years ago, found the DeGrussa deposit with very high grades of copper. We did a lot of work looking at the region, and we essentially found about 500 square kilometers of free tenement areas, 5 in all. 2 of them have actually already been joint ventured to Victory Mines, the company I mentioned before that we have slightly over 10% of, and they'll be drilling into those joint ventures. We still have a retained 30% interest of project equity in those areas. But we also have another 3 larger projects in that region that we still own 100% of. We're still acquiring more ground around them, and we're working on that to prepare a field season early next year to do groundwork, soil sampling, to start to prepare our first drill targets. So we're very keen on these projects, and we'll also get data, obviously, from the Victory Mines drilling that they'll be doing soon as well. Yeah. Yeah. So look, I mean, I think the gold copper story is a very good adjunct. The only other thing that I'd say, and Jesse does have a recent announcement from Victory Mines to pass around, is that we have another project in joint venture with Victory, which they'll be drilling in the near term. It's a copper, nickel, platinum project with other precious metals like gold and silver. And that strategy of keeping some project equity, having a shareholding, and therefore monetizing some of our exploration, I think is a very good way to create added value whilst you wait for your own exploration to bear fruit, which is what you do whilst you're developing your production assets and your earnings assets. So I think we're providing a very strong, diversified story there for a small company, and with a market cap of currently approximately about $4 to $5 million Australian, I think we're deeply discounted in a way that mitigates against most risks. Thanks a lot for your attendance.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, for that presentation. That was great. What we'll do now is open it up to questions from the audience. And just to repeat what I said at the beginning, how this will work is please in the questions or chat dialog box, you can type in a question or a question mark, and if you have a microphone, you can ask it, or if you don't have a microphone, then Andrew, I can see it, but I think on your end you cannot. So anyway, we have a question from Sheldon Traub, and I think he actually doesn't have a microphone. I think he wants to know about the status if you have a 43101 or the equivalent. He wanted to know about what the status is there.
That's right. Yeah, no. In Australia, we have the JORC code,
right.
And essentially that's the equivalent of the 43101. So we've done quite a lot of drilling. There was an initial JORC resource there, but since then it's obviously gone up to the measured category, and more recently, obviously to get into the reserve category, we had an independent group of consultants work and independently state our economic reserve that is in our mining lease. So at mineable reserve, so economic reserve, we've got approximately 5 million tons at slightly over 1% nickel. But that's not the global resource, that's just a portion of it, and that's the first part that we will start our development on. So there's room for expansion as well at Barnes Hill.
Okay, great. So let's just pause for a moment, make sure if anyone has a question, they have a moment to type in. While we wait for people to raise their hand, there's also a little hand symbol that you click to signify you have a question. Maybe I'll ask a question, Andrew, while we wait for people to type in. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Barnes Hill, to go back a little bit. And just, well, first of all, maybe a little bit about, maybe I missed it, but the timeline. I think you had said 3 to 4 months so you get the operating approval, right, the license, and then from there, if all goes well, what would be kind of the ideal timeline actually move forward into production?
Well, I mean, I think it'll take about 9 months to put the project together. So to some extent, you're looking at first production in early 2014. I think it's fair to say. It depends how quickly we can do some of the work so that you can start producing whilst you're just finishing off the plant, so, as it were, because it is a leach facility. So yeah, I mean, sort of late next year, early 2014 is when you're looking to get your first production out from the project, and obviously there's quite a bit that we're doing apart from that in the meantime whilst we're working on that development.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for clarifying there. I want to see if anybody else has a question. I want to give them a minute to type in, of course, if they do. And then if there, we'll give a few minutes. But if it turns out there are not more questions, what will happen from here is I will make sure the presentation is distributed to everybody here who attended today. And I will also, if you do have further questions for Andrew or follow-up conversation you'd like to have that's warranted, I'll reach out to all of you, and of course happy to set up any follow-up discussions that everyone would like. So let's just give a moment to see if we have more questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it seems like people are quite shy today because I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand or typing their question. Let's see here. We do have a question here from Margus Hatman, and let's see if Margus, is your microphone on?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Andrew.
How's things?
Yeah, good. Well, I'm wondering, seems like the permitting has dragged out quite a bit longer than expected. So what's the sort of level of confidence here that you can do it in this timeline here?
Well, I mean, the reason I suppose that it's gone a bit longer than we'd hoped is because we're waiting to put the final data forward to the EPA. They've come back with questions, and we're going back to them with optimizations that we've found, which are actually quite exciting in terms of the ore leach, which will cut down our environmental footprint. And also it'll allow us to recover more nickel and cobalt as well. So I can't say too much about that now, but you know, the permitting delay is actually a very good thing. We'll be talking more about that over the coming month or so. But it's certainly not anything to worry about in terms of the area. The government's very happy for us to develop the site. It's an old mine site anyway, and we'll commit to a great deal of rehabilitation on the site as it stands right now. So, yeah, that's certainly nothing to be concerned about from that side.
So is this timeline sort of your optimistic view on things at the moment, or is there some statutory timeline?
We've received, I mean, the timeline is based on what our joint venture partners have told us and our environmental consultants. So we're reasonably confident in it. It can be brought forward a little bit, depending on different variables, and I suppose we're waiting on that at the moment. So that's something I can give more clarity on in about a month's time.
Okay, thank you. In terms of, I don't know if you touched that, I joined a bit later. So what's your cash situation at the moment?
We've got a company update coming out next week, so we'll cover off on that then. But I mean, essentially we bounce around just below the $1 million mark. Historically, but we're not spending much at the moment. It depends whether we drill this fourth hole at Lindeman's Bore as to what cash needs we have over the next couple of months.
Well, sounds quite low, I mean, to take the next steps in development. So.
Oh no, but we're not paying for the development though. I mean, the development is paid for by our joint venture partner.
Metals Finance you're referring to?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, looking at their stock, I mean, do they have the cash?
They have a couple of million, and I mean, obviously the Caterpillar joint debt finance arrangement and the arrangement with Dow Chemicals. I mean, these are the guys who are coming up with the money. It's not actually so much MFC, and it's certainly not Proto. I mean, the project finance, the development finance comes from outside the companies.
Isn't there an equity component somewhere?
There is, but not for Proto. MFC has to arrange that. And don't forget, with Caterpillar handling the debt, the investment from Dow would cut into the equity component. So in terms of project finance, we're pretty much there.
What's the equity component that's not covered and is yet to be raised by MFC or whatnot?
Okay, I think we're looking around the $10 to $15 mark, $10 to $15 million mark.
Right. And what's the and that will be supposedly raised by them somehow and into the project, right? So.
Yeah, well, through offtake arrangements, forward selling, so on and so forth. Quite straightforward sort of mechanisms.
Okay. So what's, in the end of the day, what is Proto's envisioned equity ownership of the project?
About 50%.
50, right? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Margus. Just, I guess, raise your hand again if you have any further questions. Thank you. There was another question typed in from an investor who doesn't have a microphone. He wanted to, I guess he was looking for more details on the terms of the joint venture you were talking about.
Yeah, Metals Finance is a company that we've accumulated an equity position in them over time. We own about slightly over 19% of MFC. And under the arrangement, Metals Finance has to, we own 100% of Barnes Hill, but they can earn into 50% of it by putting the project into production, raising the capital for that, some of which would be paid out through first profits as well. Essentially, MFC has to raise the capital, which takes the development costs off our balance sheet, and some of that also would come out of the first profits that we have. But Proto would start earning profits from the project immediately. Only a portion goes to MFC in terms of repayment of the money that they put together for the project.
Okay, great, thank you. Again, that investor doesn't have a microphone, so I guess I'm speaking for him.
Fair enough.
So I wanted to give the opportunity, see if there's any final questions. I didn't see any others pop up, but let's just give one more moment, see if there's any final questions. But if there's not, I want to thank everybody who attended. Again, I'll be following up with you, so if you have any further questions for Andrew, or happy to put you in touch with him for a follow-up, one-on-one discussion or anything of that nature. Andrew, I don't see any final questions, so I know maybe, I don't know, you can have the final word, and we can
thank you. Sure. Look, I mean, essentially what we're looking to do at Proto is get our nickel development up and running. We've got very strong partnerships there with Caterpillar to assist us with that, and using the Dow technology at the front end. And then with our gold copper exploration, we're looking to create value through our own exploration in the Northern Territory in WA, but also with those joint ventures in WA with Victory Mines, where we have a large equity holding as well. So there's a number of ways of creating value across the board whilst you put a project into production. And apart from where we're heading with the nickel and the nickel technology, I think we'll make a very strong showing, even more so than we have already, in relation to our gold, copper exploration and drilling that's going to be ongoing there through Victory Mines, and our own drilling work in the Northern Territory and WA as well. So I think we're coming into a good market, and I think it's one that will be well rewarded in for our efforts across the board.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody who tuned in today. We appreciate your time. Everyone have a great day. Thanks very much. This will end our eRoadshow. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.